Let's go back to Opelka for a second, because I don't know if we glossed over this. On route to reaching that final, he beat a guy named Novak Djokovic. That's a big win. And I watched most of that match. That was not a guy who just served 35 aces and too good today. I mean, he was hanging in there in rallies. He was hitting the backhand. Did you catch much of that match? And both sides of the net, what's your read on that result?
With Novak, this is less alarming just based on matchup and the fact that someone can serve well. Now, obviously, Reilly did more than just serve well, but when you're he's one of the few people that's probably guaranteed a handful of holds against Novak. I'm not that concerned. If Novak got his matches in, maybe he picks up one or two. The training and heat is not going to be bad for him. Murray's done skiing. He's going to go down to Australia, and they're going to be together. I'm not super alarmed for Novak. It's not as if he's doesn't know how to play tennis. I think the best of 5 format favors Novak over everyone except maybe a couple players on earth at this point in his career. You know, there's a long road still. Let's say this is 3 out of 5. Opelka wins the first 2. He still has to be physically there. He still has to be mentally there. It's still a long way to beat Novak. I would be more stressed out if I was part of Novak's team if he had lost to someone who wasn't a huge server, right? Who couldn't take the racket out of your hands, someone who makes balls, and Novak has a weird loss. I'm not too concerned about it. I think it's a way better result for Opelka than it is negative for Novak going into Australia. But listen, Opelka currently ranked 293 in the world before this week. Formerly top 10, no, not top 10, top 20, maybe top 15 for a cup of coffee, but someone that no one wanted to see, someone that could put wins together, someone who wins matches a lot of the time in pretty much every event that he enters. I hope his back is fine. He needs to take care of his body. If I'm his team, maybe he doesn't even hit balls for a couple of days after this. You just got to make sure the big guy is healthy going into the Australian Open. But I'm not too concerned about Novak. I thought what was interesting was Opelka talked about after Novak was sometimes there's a certain comfort in the simplicity of what you have to do against the greats. Not saying that what the greats present to you isn't extremely significant. Obviously it is. But he goes, I can't win extended rallies with Novak. I can't get into a situation where we're switching directions. So it's pretty simple. I get a second serve. I have 2 feet under me. I hit it as hard as I can. Like there is very clear strategy in playing someone like a Novak when you have Reilly's skill set. And sometimes it's almost less pressure because what you have to do is so clear. I felt it when I played Rafa. It's like, I can't get into extended rallies side to side. My backhand cross court to his forehand is not something that's going to go well. I have to serve and volley a lot more than I normally would. I have to take bigger chances on my second serve. I have to go after every single forehand that's even close to the strike zone, even at the risk of looking idiotic sometimes because you're taking risks that are irresponsible. But you know, it's amazing to me. And one, Opelka executed. That was amazing. You mentioned the match he played. When he broke in the second set, he basically hit 3 winners. Novak played 1 bad shot in that game. Like he took the racket out of Novak's hands. But it's amazing to me. I thought about 1, great for Reilly. 2, how long has Novak been taking people's best shot like that?
That's what he was saying.
Decades.
Right? It's insane. Yeah, he said you play more free because, you know, it's totally. Like you're going up against the greatest, so what do you have to lose?
Now, you play more free. That also means there's no chance that you minimize your risk or take your risk down when you're playing the greats. And I've talked about it a million times, but you're going nuts. So if you're Reilly and you miss balls, then all of a sudden you're broken in the first game. So it can go both ways. But what it is, it's not simple as far as executing. That's impossible. If it was simple, everyone would do it. What he has to do, he can only win really one way. Like he's got to take the racket out of his hands. So what do? You try to do it. Now, executing is tougher. Props to Opelka for being extremely short of match play and still realizing that and putting 2 and 2 together there. But just taking someone's best shot for that long and we're shocked by it working. I mean, that's pretty impressive, right? And sometimes it's like, okay, Novak wasn't losing these matches in the quarterfinals of random events 2 years ago. And now I almost appreciate it more when it's like, oh, Novak lost. I'm like, God, man, he didn't lose much for like 2 decades. Like I go the other way with it. I'm not like criticizing. I'm going, man, this didn't even happen at all against players like Opelka, that's impossible. But the longevity and the consistency, I'm going, man, that's hard. not to take a loss every once in a while.
It's
crazy.
2008. I think we all do this casually. Novak Djokovic, who won Australia for the first time in 2008, and you say, wait a second, like George Bush was president, like 19, whatever.
We still trusted financial institutions. Okay,
we've always trusted Blue Owl Capital.
Yeah, that's true. Blue Owl Capitals, you can trust them.
Let me ask you an adjacent question to that, which is, and I'm as guilty as this as anyone. I feel like when we have big servers and big guys, Opelka beat my guy Perricard in the semis. You could have Leheshka if I can have Giovanni Perricard. But I feel like the analysis can be kind of, they're serve bots and it's wear a helmet and pray you guessed right. I think when we have big servers, we're kind of lazy in the analysis. I am anyway. Take us onto the court. You're on the other side of the net from a guy who's got an NBA frontline body and is serving 130 mile an hour second. What really is the play when you're on the other side of the net from a guy like Opelka or Perricard? What really is the mindset?
You try to become as much of a volume returner as possible. So that's why you look at people like Roger, who could chip returns, didn't need to swing. He could swing 6 inches and put you at neutral. Right. So like I wanted to be a volume returner. I wanted to give him different looks. I'm not you can call me a serve bot, but I wasn't 7 feet tall. My serve is nowhere near these guys and what they're throwing out there. I had a good serve, but it was off of 6'2". It was never going to be Isner. It was in the realm of the height where most people returned. So for me, early on, I would try to step way back, make them play, see if they're a little jittery. That's not working. You mix up you have to sell out on the first serve, right? You have to lean one way. So maybe you hold a forehand grip and you chip a backhand, or even maybe you'd hold a backhand grip and try to hide it from the person and chip your forehand. You just try to make the first ball and then you scrap, right? You absolutely scrap. You try to make them play returns at 30 all points, come up with misses. You chip the ball, you switch directions. You make them actually have to play a little bit of tennis along the way. But being a big server, not as big as them, but a big server, I knew how to implement what I didn't like. What I didn't like to see people, if someone was doing the same thing over and over and over and it wasn't working, all of a sudden I'm finding my groove and I'm just cycling through service games. And that's the best feeling in the world. Not having to pace, not having to overthink it, hit your spots. They can't handle your kick. But I will say, and I know we become victims of the moment with the Opelka, the Perricard, it's like the serve bot, covered court. It sounds really good serving conditions, no wind. There are a lot of things that were beneficial for servers this week in Brisbane. You always have to think about that. When everyone was serving over 70% at year-end finals, that's crazy. That's also not happening at an outdoor event where all of a sudden you have to adjust your toss a foot right or left based on where the sun comes up. I know in Miami at 1 o'clock, I'm not going to be able to see the toss on one side of the court. So I have to adjust it, throw it way out to the right or back way over left. They're not dealing with any of those things. It's see ball, hit ball, find rhythm, and serve bot.
Let me ask you one more quick Opelka adjacent question. You ever have a career, I don't think career threatening, but you ever have an injury that sort of caused you to really assess your place in the sport? I mean, he did some matches, did some work at Tennis Channel, and remember, this is a guy, he came up with Taylor Fritz and with Francis and Tommy Paul, was really in the mix, top 25 player, as you say, this complete sort of Yeti, this like unique species, 7 feet tall, bearded guy, loves art. And then he had hip injuries, as not surprisingly someone, on hard courts with a 7 foot tall body might have. Then he had this wrist surgery that did not go so well. And he was, I think there were some questions whether he would play tennis again. I wonder what it does to an athlete, especially sort of a self-contained, self-aware athlete, coming back from a period like that when you wondered if you'd ever play again. Did you ever have a situation like that?
No, I never had anything that took me out. I had to adjust my entire game, and I've never talked about this because there was no point in advertising it. But 2008, I pulled out of, it was in Rome. I made semis. I had to pull out. My shoulder was bad, and my shoulder was largely pretty good considering what I did to it. I had a small tear on the front side of my shoulder. It wasn't something that was going to, if I had surgery, and I dealt with it till the end of my career, but it was basically, I lost probably 10% off my fastball on my serve. That motion didn't hurt the worst. The worst was trying to flatten out and pinch a forehand that was about shoulder height, right? So not flattening out that ball, but then I had to kind of change my swing path on my forehand to where it became a lot spinnier, a lot more defensive. I couldn't flatten it out as easily as I could from, way up above my head. I had to get in better shape to account for the fact that I was going to have to run more if I couldn't crunch my forehand like I used to. So it wasn't the same as Reilly. I was never out for an extended period of time. I was generally pretty healthy during my career. If I was hurt at the end of 2009. I messed up my knee a bunch, but I was back in time barely for Brisbane in 2010. But yeah, I don't know the psychology of maybe I'll never play again, and now I can. I got to think it makes you more appreciative, not to say you're not before. I got to think you treat every match as if it has a certain amount of significance. With Reilly, he has to know if I can just get healthy, I can be a disruptor. You can't take away my serve, right? Even if my wrist isn't perfect on my forehand anymore, like my shoulder wasn't great on my forehand, he can still be so effective, right? Maybe he switches it up. Maybe he comes in more. Maybe there's ways to adjust. So for him, I would guess and I would think, and I would, if I was in his team, I would tell him there is reason for optimism. Isner, I would use Isner as an example. He played till he was almost 40 years old with a big body, right? So there's going to be a lot of time left. We just have to get healthy, adjust schedule, listen to your body. Maybe that's what he was doing in the final against Lehechka, but I'm happy he's back. He is dangerous. He is exciting for American tennis. He would probably tell you he's a little eccentric. He's not someone that is, one of the Americans who's going through the SEC standings when you're, overseas. He's talking about art galleries and different bags, and he's a super interesting independent thinker, which, maybe we don't see enough in this little world of tennis. But I think we're all better for him being in the mix. And I promise you, man, no one wants to play him. No one wanted to play him, and no one wants to play him now. He's exciting. No, not a single person. He's probably the biggest number one thing where a top player is going, nope, don't want him, any part of him the first 3 rounds of the Australian Open. Now, that being said, we haven't tested fitness in best of 5. If he gets to a 4th set, that's a lot different. The wind is going to be different in Melbourne. The sun in the angle of the serve is going to be a lot different. So it's not as easy as good in Brisbane, good rest of the year, let a rip tater chip. But we just hope he's healthy, because there's no doubt he's a top 20 caliber player consistently, not one time, consistently, and maybe even better with this perspective. Who knows how the last 2 years have worn on him, but it's good to see him back. Unbelievable win over the best men's player of all time last week in Brisbane. That has to give him, listen, if his back is okay, he's got to be chomping at the bit to start this year and to get on with it. And for his sake, when you come back from an injury, let's say he loses first round there, then it's like, okay, maybe you lose a tough 5-setter second round. And then it's, these kind of, scar tissue moments of, can I still do it? He knows he can do it straight out of the gate. Brisbane, he played great level of tennis. So that's a big week, regardless of how it goes in Australia. He knows that level is there if he needs it. Osaka, I hope the ab is okay. Any thoughts on your boy, Pechi Perricard? JW, he's your guy. He's your guy.
It's my Lehechka. No, I think, we have fun with this. I had a lot of the same thoughts you did, which is he's fun, he's entertaining. I think the serve bot, you don't win matches as a serve bot. It helps. It's a nice weapon, but you got to be able to, you got to be able to move. You have to play points. You have to break them. I think there's more to his game and more to Reilly's game than just serving aces. But I had a lot of your instincts too, which is, nice result. Won some matches to start the year, made some headlines, and everyone's frustrated and making jokes. But best of 5 outdoors at a major. I'm not sure I would read too much into these results, but yeah, it must be nice to be 6'5". I remember you said this about Karlovic once. It was a great line. You walked off the court the first time you played him and said, now I know what it's like to try and return to someone who's serving from up in a tree. And the angle of delivery when you're 6'10" versus 6'2", 6'3" is pretty significant. But yeah, I don't know how much, it was a fun week for him. I'm not sure that it has a whole lot of predictive value going into a major where you've got to play in much different weather conditions and best of 5. Yeah,
the good point on the 7 feet of things. So people look at the angle you can create. People look at the speed, of a longer arm right? It's that thing in golf where like the longer flowy take back, all of a sudden you're launching the ball 40 yards further.
I wouldn't know.
You wouldn't. That's true. I've seen it. But like my coach used to stand inside the service line and just bounce serves into the box to where my contact point on a return is normally like shoulder height or maybe just below. And against Isner, it's above your forehead, right? So even knowing how to like knock it down from there is something you see twice, 3 times a year, to Jon's point. So it's not just guessing the right way. It's also like you can't, it's harder to knock something down when it's above your head. Like these are all little micro factors when you're playing someone who used to kind of just be Karlovic, and now it's Isner, and now it's Perricard, and now it's Opelka, and these guys can serve, and it is a problem. JW, something I want to get your best guess at, or maybe something factual. The Rybakina former coach Goran situation, he's suspended. He's not going to be credentialed in Australia. She releases a statement saying, okay, he's back in. Let's get some clarity on that. We'll pause. We'll go to a break. But afterwards, after the break, maybe you tell me what's real and what's not.